Miss Havina stood dumbfounded and looked at the young man. He looked at her and said that he was entrusting everything he had into her hands. She looked at him in shock, her eyes fixed. In a trembling voice, she asked Mr. Jinny Hen if he was really giving her the card. He tenderly handed her the key card to his house. Jin Hyun looked at her and asked if she would take responsibility for him. The young lady was shocked that Hunter Jin Hyun was asking her to become his housekeeper in such a strange manner. 10 years ago, in the world and in all cities, people lived a calm, quiet life. But suddenly dungeons opened up all over the world, and great changes came to the land. People were in shock and did not understand what kind of monsters were heading towards them from the dungeons. Numerous monsters that emerged from the dungeons literally hunted people. And people, because of their helplessness in the face of the falling misfortune, could only silently endure blow after blow. People ran in a hurry to quickly escape from the monsters. There was turmoil. And in such a situation, no one could escape. The little boy ran away from the attacks of monsters, but he froze when he saw a ferocious monster on his way. The boy covered his hand so as not to see the monster. At the moment when man was faced with an extinction crisis, the awakened ones appeared. The little child was lucky, and one of the heroes stood up for him. With the help of their powerful abilities, they quickly suppressed the attacks of the monsters. And thanks to such people, the chaotic world gradually became stable. However, since the dungeons did not disappear completely, the Awoken became an important part of society, centered on guilds. And in particular, hunters who went into battle, risking their lives, received fame and great wealth. But of course, the whole world had nothing to do with the young lady. Since she was a simple official worker for the time being, the girl was stunned and did not understand what was happening when she saw a notification that she had awakened new abilities. She thought that she was just imagining things. Since it was already the 3rd day that I worked overtime, the girl thought that it seemed that she no longer distinguished between a document and a notification window. The young lady was shocked. She didn't understand why she had the ability. After a few minutes, she realized that she wasn't imagining it after all. Her supervisor ran up to Miss Wynn. The manager thought that the girl had deleted some documents because she was so nervous. Miss Wynn, in a panic, tried to close all notifications and asked the manager not to say such frightening words. The manager did not understand what was happening. She approached the girl and said that she really scared her when she screamed. Miss Wynn said she received a notification that she had awakened. The girl was shocked. She shouted to Miss Wynn that she was seeing and being near the awakened one for the first time. She asked if the girl really sees the status window. She bombarded the young lady with questions. Miss Wynn was taken aback by the flow of questions. Miss Wynn said that it says that the download process is still in progress. The leader said that most likely the girl would be a hunter, since most people become hunters after awakening. She said that she was a little jealous of the girl and also said that she would be rich. The girl knew that everything depended on rank. She realized that she might have a low rank like her brother, so she thought that she should work in an office then. The girl was very sad because she did not know which dungeon her brother was in. But still she believed and begged God that her brother would be whole and invisible. They stood for several minutes waiting for the class to appear. But for a long time, nothing happened. The manager was shocked that the system was working very slowly. She even said that the system is the same as her prehistoric computer. The girl was shocked. She said that at this rate a new day could come. The girl said that she needed to go home. Miss Wynn was glad that she could be alone and find out the result. Miss Wynn said that she would be staying a while longer. The girl looked at Miss Wynn and said that she would love to be a hunter. After wishing Miss Wynn a good evening, she went home. Miss Wynn understood that waking up wouldn't do all the work for her, so she decided to quickly sort out the paperwork. The young lady remembered that it was said that after awakening, a person's stamina became better than that of an ordinary person. She hoped that working overtime would become easier. For a second, she realized that no matter how much she worked, the number of documents did not decrease. Unable to bear it, she shouted that it would be good if the company went bankrupt. Suddenly, something shook her table. The girl in a hurry thought it was an earthquake and decided to quickly hide under the table. While she was infecting under the table, she accidentally hit her head. A moment later, she saw an incomprehensible light. The young lady hesitated for several minutes and did not open her eyes. A moment later, she opened her eyes and was shocked by what she saw. Looking around, she realized that she was in a dungeon. The young lady was surprised by everything, namely by the fact that it was a dungeon. She thought before that this could only be seen on the news, but to her surprise, this was not the case. The young girl was in shock and did not understand why she had such a win. As far as she knew, such incidents were less common than lightning strikes. The girl was shocked since a lot had befallen her. Not only did she work overtime, but she was also thrown into the dungeon. She understood that it was already deep after midnight, so it was unlikely that there would be any hunters in the dungeon. She didn't understand whether she could hold out on her own until the hunters showed up. The young girl was in shock and did not understand what to do. She was afraid and did not want to die in such a place. Suddenly, she saw that the search for a suitable class was completed. She realized that she had recently awakened. She knelt down and prayed to all the gods she knew that her class would be a combat class. She frantically begged the gods for it to be some kind of fighting type and also have strong capabilities, when suddenly she saw that they were congratulating her. She saw notifications that she had awakened and her hidden housekeeper class. The young lady was shocked. She saw some grass that she could use. One type of grass could be eaten, and another type of grass, if eaten, could cause death. The young lady looked around and found some grass that she could eat, and it was very tasty. And in an instant, her skill in pulling out useful grass increased. 3 hours earlier, when she saw her class, she was furious. Miss Huyn didn't understand what kind of class this was. She saw information that said she could make a living with her golden hands. After the general information, Lee saw her status. She was perplexed by all the indicators. Lee managed to put all her thoughts aside as she heard an incomprehensible noise. Turning around towards the noise, Lee saw a dinosaur. She was shocked by such a sight. The girl was furiously frightened. She screamed at the top of her voice. Lee decided not to stand still. She ran as fast as she could, away from the terrible beast, calling people for help. Lee didn't know what to do. She knew that if her agility was 300 units, she still would not have defeated the beast. The dinosaur ran after its prey. Lee knew that at this rate the monster would kill her. She saw a swamp. Without hesitation, Elle decided to jump into the swamp. She knew this was the best option. She looked at the dinosaur and realized that he could not get into the water. She felt relieved. Lee heard a noise. Turning around, she saw a dinosaur in the water. Lee started to run with all her might, but because of the swamp, she moved too slowly. Looking at the dinosaur, she realized that this time she would really die. The girl froze and was taken aback after she saw that the dinosaurs were fighting among themselves. The young lady saw a tiered fight of animals. The girl realized that this was great luck for her, and she would be able to survive after their fight. When the young lady crawled out of the swamp, she felt her whole body aching. She looked at the birds flying past and realized that until the rescue team arrived, she would need to hide somewhere. Sitting on the ground, she decided that she needed to look at her skills. Since she had to run away, she couldn't properly figure everything out. She hoped that among the skills there would be at least something useful. She looked at all her skills, and among them there was one passive skill, pulling out useful grass. The young lady was surprised because she realized that she just needed to pull out non-poisonous plants. Lee set to work, and her skill in pulling out useful herbs grew rapidly, and she was able to collect the herbs to make a comfortable bed. The young lady was puzzled, since she had never even woven bast shoes, and did not understand how she could weave a mattress and a blanket. Looking at her hands, puzzled, she realized what she needed to do. She was surprised as she saw the power of the skill. After making a comfortable bed to sleep in, she was very happy with the result at the end. The young lady was very happy that her hunger problem had been solved, as she was very hungry and thought of pulling some more grass to eat. After everything, the young lady decided to rest a little. Suddenly, she heard some incomprehensible hissing. Looking back, she saw a snake. The young lady was in shock, as she understood that she was not allowed to rest for a second. She did not even have the strength to run. The girl decided to hide under the cover of grass. The snake looked at the grass and decided that there was nothing there, so it turned around and slowly crawled on. The young lady was very happy, as luck smiled on her and she was able to survive. She was skeptical that her plan would work, but she was lucky. Looking at the bed, I was puzzled by the fact that it was really comfortable. She finally stopped being nervous, but felt drowsy. She knew she couldn't fall asleep, but she couldn't help it. Opening her eyes, she saw an incomprehensible silhouette. Suddenly, unexpectedly for her, someone poked her with a stick. The young huntress came closer to Elle and asked if she had woken up yet. The young huntress looked at her with a smile and said that she thought that the girl was a plant-type monster with a human appearance. But she was convinced that there was still a person in front of her. Lee was numb and looked at the huntress with big eyes. She was very glad that she came to save her. Throwing herself into her arms, she thanked the huntress. The huntress looked at the girl and asked her to calm down. The young lady looked at her and said with a smile that she was just very glad to see her. The huntress looked at her and said with a smile that she saw that the girls had a very hard time. The young lady looked at her savior and realized that she had soiled her. She was very ashamed. After hesitating, the young lady asked in a trembling voice if they had left to deal with the boss. The huntress looked at her and said that they naturally figured it out, although because of the gate, the entire area was engulfed in chaos, but the dungeon itself was of low rank. The young lady was shocked, as she barely managed to survive in such a dungeon. The young lady realized that she was very lucky. The huntress looked at the young lady and asked if she had recently awakened. The young lady was in shock and did not understand how the huntress could find out that she had recently awakened. The huntress looked at her and said that she hid her presence, and only the awakened could do this. But she also knew that if she could be detected, it means that we are talking about a low rank. The huntress was puzzled, since there were no awakened ones on the list of missing persons. The huntress looked at the young lady and asked if she knew that it was against the law to hide her abilities and pretend to be an ordinary person. The young lady of the ball is puzzled and said that she woke up before falling into the dungeon because she worked overtime until late and then got sucked into the dungeon. She ran away from monsters and hid using new skills. The huntress looked at her and said with a smile that the girl had woken up perfectly. She asked her which awakened rank she belonged to. The young lady was a little taken aback and didn't know how to tell the huntress about her skill. The girl said that she was a housekeeper. The huntress was at a loss, since this was the first time she had heard of such a class. The huntress was puzzled and asked if it was the same meaning as she thought, since the housekeeper managed the housekeeping and cooking, and also did cleaning, washing, and ironing. The huntress smiled and said that in her entire life, this was the first time she had heard of such a class. She also asked what about skills. The young lady looked at her and said that her list of skills included making a comfortable bed and pulling useful grass. The huntress laughed. The girl was puzzled and said that, nevertheless, thanks to such skills, she was able to survive. The huntress asked for forgiveness and said that this was truly an amazing thing. Their sweet dialogue was disturbed by the arrival of the young man. The young man, approaching them, said that the rescue operation was completed, so they needed to go to the exit. The young lady looked at the young man in bewilderment. The young lady stood and watched the hunters talk. The girl knew that that man was one of the most powerful hunters. Such people were called the Hand of Destruction, since where he passed from the monsters only ash remained. He was the first in the ranking of awakened ones, a hunter named Kang Jin-hyun. The young lady looked at him and realized that when she saw him on the screen, the thought came to her that he was so good-looking, but in reality he was even better. For some time she stood and looked at him intently. The huntress approached the young lady and told Khan to stop grumbling, since she just chatted a little with the newly awakened bird. The huntress looked at her friend and asked if he would also like to hear about the young lady, since her class and skills are very specific. The huntress said that she had not had so much fun for a long time. Khan looked at her and told her to leave the girl alone, since he was not interested in other people's information. The huntress was furious at her friend's words. She didn't understand how she could behave like that with a newcomer who didn't know anything. She screamed at her friend to at least adhere to basic standards of behavior and basic manners. She said that she did not extract information from her through threats. She simply asked and received an answer. The young man looked at them and said that he would give them one piece of advice, since it was too dangerous and careless to reveal information about his awakening or abilities to strangers. The young lady looked at them and said that there was nothing wrong with that, since her rank was low and her skills were so-so anyway. The young hunter was very glad that the girl took her side. She thanked her for her support with a smile. When leaving, Kang said that for her own safety, it was better for her to hide information regarding her awakening. The young lady said that she understood and thanked him. The huntress looked after her friend and said that although he was young, his inner mentality was like that of a 100-year-old man. The huntress looked at her friend and said that Khan, in general, was right. She looked at her and said with a smile that although she didn't specifically ask her about everything, she still went a little too far. Lee smiled and said that she shouldn't apologize since she saved her, so she should at least share information about herself with the huntress. Lee said she seemed to feel much better because she spoke out to the hunter. The young huntress began to shake the young lady. Lee was in shock. She didn't understand what was happening from the hunter's behavior. The huntress looked at her friend and said that she liked her. The huntress did not understand how a person could express himself so beautifully. She said that there is not a single person around her who speaks as friendly and softly as the girl. Lee was confused because she always talked like that. The huntress looked at the girl and gave her business card, adding that she could call at any time and she would treat her to food. The huntress said that if the girl has questions about awakening, she can ask without hesitation. The huntress smiled and said that they should hurry up. The young lady watched her trail in shock. Lee looked after the girl and called her. Wu Ming was perplexed. Lee looked at her and said that she was truly grateful to her for saving her. The huntress looked at her and said that there was no need to thank her for anything, and she also asked what the girl's name was. Lee introduced herself, and the huntress said that they needed to leave this place as soon as possible. They came out of the dungeon and saw a terrible sight. Umina said that there are emergency personnel nearby, so can they go for testing and consult about the damage caused by the disaster that happened. Lee said that she would definitely go and thank the huntress. They politely said goodbye. The young lady understood that although her body was a little stiff, it seemed to her that there were no abnormalities. Looking around, she was shocked. She took a close look at the damage after the incident. Lee remembered how the huntress told her that because of the gate, the entire territory was engulfed in chaos. Although Lee heard all the news from the huntress, she didn't think it would be on a scale. The young man ran up to the girl and asked if she was okay or not. He also asked if she was injured and if she needed to be put on a stretcher. Lee said in a trembling voice that she was fine and didn't need help. Lee was in shock because of the portal, her company and home disappeared without a trace. She was shocked because her house was literally across the street. She specifically looked for a house near the company. She couldn't understand why she needed all this, since she worked extra hours specifically for the sake of the house. She was furious at what had happened and screamed into the distance. The young men stood and looked at the girl and her behavior. One of the men said that it seemed that the girl's house had disappeared without a trace, while another young man said that this was not surprising, since the house is essentially the same as the soul. The young lady decided to walk a little. She understood that the company that paid her salary was now definitely bankrupt. She also did not know whether she should hope for compensation for the house. Just in case, she decided to come to the house, flattering herself with illusory hope. After all, for the first time, she was able to rent an apartment by paying a deposit after a series of moves with monthly payments. She was furious because her house, deposit, and furniture were all gone. She screamed into the distance and asked for everything to be returned to her. Suddenly, she saw a notification. She was congratulated on her new open skill. The house was unlocked. Young Lee did not understand that if this was really such a skill, then it was much cooler than the lottery. But she felt somehow uneasy, but she understood that she needed to at least try something, since she still had nothing to lose. She shouted the name of the skill. A door appeared in front of the young lady. She was surprised because she had never seen this before. Lee walked around the door and realized that there was nothing on the opposite side. She was at a loss as the skill was activated. She understood that first she needed to enter the door. Looking back, she realized that nothing had essentially changed. She looked and saw that a notification window had popped up since she first entered the house. The state of the house was automatically adjusted according to the user's characteristics, so she stood and waited. Lee was a little puzzled because the program was loading very slowly. The young lady was a little puzzled since she was covered in dirt and wanted to wash herself. It took some time for the download to complete. She was a little surprised because after the download was completed, she was blinded by a stream of light, and she was distracted as she did not see anything. A little taken aback, the girl rubbed her eyes, as for a minute it seemed to her that she had gone blind. Coming to my senses, she decided to quickly look at the house. She saw that only an old one-room studio apartment of a basic type was available to her. The young lady thought that such a shelter was much better than currently huddling in a corner of the temporary shelter for victims. Entering the house, she was taken aback. She didn't understand what it was, because she saw that the apartment resembled a real garbage dump. She decided to look at the restroom. Lee entered the restroom and was shocked by the sight. Everything was dirty and the smell was unbearable. Lee thought it would be better if she went to a shelter for victims. She saw a notification. It said about concluding an agreement to purchase a studio apartment. She refused and wanted to be shown other options, but after a while the answer disappeared. She was shocked and screamed that she didn't want such a house. She realized that she had fallen into the clutches of scammers since she was not given any options to choose from. She was furious, but still decided to pull herself together and look at the entire apartment. She told herself to think positively because it was better than not having a roof over her head. She understood that the dirt could simply be cleaned to a shine. A moment later, she was congratulated with a notification about the purchase of an apartment. The young lady was shocked because not only had they given her a fraudulent contract for the purchase of real estate, they were also making fun of her. She would like to quickly maintain the comfort of the house and tidy up a little, but she received a notification that she does not have enough abilities and requires lengthy training. The girl was furious and did not understand why she lacked abilities. She shouted that, despite the fact that she felt offended, she tried to control herself, but the system went too far. She screamed for the system to be removed quickly. A snail crawled out from under the corner and said that it was not a system. The girl was shocked and thought it was a pest and automatically used her pest extermination skill. She hit the snail with all her anger and fury. The snail was a little dumbfounded and thought that his landlady was very cruel. Lee came closer to the snail and asked for forgiveness because she thought that some kind of bug had climbed on it. He was a little shocked and said that she had a bad habit of letting her hands go. Lee said that anyone could behave this way out of fear and asked if the snail's words were too harsh. The snail looked at her and said that the attacking party has no right to make excuses. Lee said that it was really her fault. She looked at her and asked if she wasn't the one who congratulated her on fulfilling her dream of owning a house. The snail said that he and she thought correctly. Lee said that she immediately thought so, since the shape and color of the notification window were different, which meant the snail was not a system. He said that she thought everything right. The girl was puzzled and asked what his true nature was then. She said it didn't look like an ordinary snail. Snail said that she is the manager of the home provided by the Sweet Home skill. The snail bowed to the landlady and said that he was counting on her very much. The young lady still decided to take a bath, but since her conditions at home were not suitable, she decided to go to one establishment. She was very glad that she decided to go after all, because she felt alive. She couldn't bring herself to wash herself in that bathroom. Lee was very glad that she did not lose her credit card during the attack and after. She understood that she now needed to go to the dungeon management office to reissue her ID card, as well as buy a cell phone and essential supplies. She knew that she still needed to call her company, just in case. Lee knew she had a lot to do, but she also wanted to soak in the warm water. Lee thanked the girl for the warm bath. She knew that the speed of eliminating damage from a dungeon rupture was similar to the speed of light, but it also showed how hard people were working hard. She knew she needed to buy a phone and leave a message for her brother. She thought that he was very scared when he discovered that the house was missing. She still had a few savings, so she was able to live for a while. Lee called the company and was told that it had been decided to close the company that morning. They apologized to her. Lee recently heard that the economy was in dire straits, and it was difficult to find a new job. She was wondering if she could find something for herself as soon as possible. She was not going to give up because she needed work. She told herself that she would find a job, period. She knew that she couldn't sit idly by and had to complete the assigned tasks. She knew that even if the situation was more difficult now, it was still much better than 10 years ago. Lee knew that thanks to her awakening, she managed to stay alive. She knew that she needed to think it over carefully. The young lady hurried home. Lee was very happy that the front door could be opened anywhere. Lee met her new friend, and the snail said that she had very weak hands, and also that she lacked the necessary knowledge of economics. This is a snail house manager with certain skills, although outwardly he was very nice, but he was still a grumbler. Lee was furious and told the snail to look at the things in the bags as it was only a cleaner product and she had wasted a lot of money. The snail looked at her and said that she needed to compare the prices of products in each store since she did not have the concept of thrifty seating. She said that she completely agreed with the snail, but she had too much to do. So while she was running errands, she did not have enough time to compare prices. She said that one store had budget prices, so she decided to buy everything there. The snail said that the girl thinks rationally and asked her to start cleaning. Lee said that she would do everything quickly. The girl was positive and decided to start quickly. Lee started cleaning, but the snail said that a basic cleaning kit was no good. Lee was shocked and asked how bad it was. Yulitka said that the mandatory items are a headscarf and an apron, but a mask and gloves are optional items. Lee said that she had just bought an apron, but at the same time she muttered that the snail was very picky about her. After she put everything on, she improved all her skills effectively. The young lady was surprised because after some time, her new skill was activated. She saw that the explanation was somewhat vague, but in any case, she knew that the skill was good. She said that she would try to do everything 100%. The snail wished her good luck. 3 hours later, Elle realized that she had burned to the ground. She received a notification that her dexterity skill had increased, looking at how much Elle was surprised, since after 3 hours of cleaning, it had increased by only 12 units. After counting all the numbers, she realized that if you spend about 8 hours a day on cleaning, then it will take about 21 days to improve your skill. She understood that in 3 weeks she would be able to increase her rank, but unfortunately, she was very exhausted, already in just 3 hours. Her new friend came up to her and said that her break was over, and she needed to continue cleaning. The young lady was very tired and asked if she could rest a little more, since she was feeling very hard. He said that she still had a lot of things to do, and she needed to start doing it immediately. The young lady said that she could not work anymore because she was very hungry and needed to eat. While eating, she realized that the food was very tasty and looked like heavenly pleasure. The friend looked at his landlady from afar and realized that she was not very picky about food, and he really liked it. Lee looked to see that she had even eaten what she bought for lunch tomorrow. She said that usually just 1 package is enough for her. But apparently she was very exhausted and hungry. She saw that she had received a notification that she had completely restored all her stamina by eating food. Lee was very happy because her stamina was restored, and she could now begin cleaning again. My gender, she was surprised that it always had a different color. She noticed that such a transformation looked like some kind of magic. She smiled and said that after such manipulations, she immediately felt better in her soul. She was in 7th heaven and rejoiced like a little child. She again saw a notification that her skill had increased by 500 points. The young lady was very happy and said that the system was incredibly generous. She noticed that it was a pleasure to work with such large bonuses. She happily cleaned up and, singing a song, went to throw out the trash. After finishing the cleaning, she was very happy because she realized that she would be able to relax. She was incredibly glad that she was able to deal with the dirtiest places. The system congratulated her, since her standard 1-room studio apartment of the basic type became the 2nd level. The young lady was very happy that the house's level had risen, and also surprised. She was very happy with the new discovery and began to pepper the snail with questions. He looked at her with big eyes and told her to calm down first, and they discussed everything in more detail. He showed her that an increase in rank was possible. Lee laughed and said that, as expected, she became a super housekeeper. The snail said that she needed peace of mind and body, and also achieve world peace. The young lady was a little surprised and asked if the snail had gone too far. After a few minutes, the system offered her a reward for increasing the level of the house. Young Elle was surprised and did not understand why the award was given by drawing lots. After the loading was completed, she was congratulated on her new purchase, namely an old mattress without a frame. Lee was incredibly surprised. Sitting by the mattress, she realized that it was some kind of wrong casino, but still she understood that it was better than sleeping on the bare floor. After examining the mattress, she realized that it seemed to be clean, although old. Sitting on the floor, she realized that she was hungry again and looked that a lot of time had already passed. Lee went to look at the bags because it seemed to her that she was buying some other snacks. She was very glad that she found it and could eat it. While Lee was eating the snail, he said that crumbs fell on the floor. Lee said she would eat and clean everything up right away. Lee noticed that the snail's body had changed a little. He said that this was the effect of raising the level, slowly becoming more and more dazzling and luxurious. Lee said the snail was very sparkly and he was very nice. The snail thanked her. Lee looked and asked what the snail's name was. The snail said that he doesn't have a name, and just being a snail suits him. Lee was shocked and said that from now on they would live together, so she couldn't keep calling him Snail. Lee looked at the snail and said that its shell was curved and asked how about the name Pinwheel. He was shocked and said there was a lack of sincerity. Lee said that such a name sounds soulless and dry. She looked at him and asked how about the 5 flowers. He said he needed to think about it. He made a decision and said that he approved of such a name. Lee smiled and said that she was counting on him from now on. Lee was shocked and could not believe that she was able to transform her home so much. But translating all the furniture was still a difficult task. She couldn't just order delivery because she didn't have an address, and she had to carry everything on herself and then go into any alley and open the door. All the muscles of her body were very sore. Lee realized that she needed fewer things than she thought. But the result was worth it. Lee was very happy after cleaning and realized that it really wasn't that bad. Lee understood that the house was more or less in order, and now all she had to do was find a job. She was puzzled that neither her brother nor the company answered her calls. She thought that perhaps she should wait a little, and if she kept applying, she would definitely be contacted one day. She remembered that she needed to meet the huntress and thank her for saving her. She didn't know if it would be okay if she got involved with a huntress from the Blue Dragon Guild. There were several awakened guilds. Among them there are those who explore the dungeon, specializing in magic. This was the White Lion. There was also a small number, but consisting of the best, called the Last Murder. There was also that guild in which most of the members had a physical awakening. There was also a large and intricate guild that mainly operates in the southern regions. This is the Seabird. And finally, the Blue Dragon. All guilds were also called the Big Five. However, since the Blue Dragon was the only guild that had high-rank hunters, it was actually considered the best guild. Moreover, the guild leader was the only awakened non-combat type among all the heads of the Big Five. But he turned out to be a man of subtle intelligence and great ingenuity, thanks to which he managed to attract many hunters to his side. The Blue Dragon Guild has been able to establish itself as one of the leading guilds in the world, because in its ranks there is even an appraiser of the highest rank, who is even much more valuable than a high-rank hunter. Lee decided to first check the page of the hunter Wu Mina. She looked at all the information about the hunter and realized that she was a very cool shot. She realized that she probably had a lot of money. She was taken aback because she wanted to buy her something to eat as a token of gratitude. She didn't know if it might suddenly make her angry, but still, she knew she had to try her best. Lee called, and the huntress told her that she was really looking forward to her call, and also asked if everything was fine with her. Lee was a little taken aback and said that she was fine, but she just didn't have time to call until today, so she could only now. The huntress laughed and said that she was talking very nicely. She also said that the girl called at the right time and asked if she had free time today, since she had a day off today, and she offered to eat together. Lee came to the establishment that Wu Min invited her to. Lee was a little surprised that they agreed to meet so quickly. She noticed that the huntress seemed to be a very impulsive person. Lee noticed that there were very few people in the cafe. But this was not surprising, since at 4 o'clock in the afternoon few people would go out to eat. She noticed the young lady's back and realized that it was a huntress. The huntress looked at her and with a smile told her to sit down with her as soon as possible. Lee said that Wu Ming came very early. The huntress said that she came early because she wanted to have a little snack. Wu Ming looked at Elle and said that in the few days they had not seen each other, she had lost a lot of weight. She noticed that she seemed to be having a hard time. Lee just smiled and didn't answer. She knew that she was suffering physically rather than mentally. The huntress suggested that she eat first and then chat. Lee agreed with her. Lee said that she is very good at frying meat. The huntress smiled and said that she would be happy to try what the girl had prepared. Lee looked at the meat and realized that she had not eaten it for quite some time, but she decided to cook it properly. Suddenly, Elle saw that she had a new skill. She was surprised because she didn't expect this, but she decided that she should rather concentrate on frying the meat. Lee fried the meat and the hunter tried it. She was surprised and said that it really is very tasty to fry meat. The young ladies were in seventh heaven, as they had never eaten anything like this before. They shouted to the owner of the establishment to bring 2 more servings, but a little taken aback, they decided that they needed 4 servings. The huntress was happy because she was able to eat very tasty. Lee said she could say the same, the way they didn't talk about anything but only did what they ate. Wu Ming came closer to the glue and shouted her name. The girl was taken aback. The huntress looked at her and asked if she would like Li to become her little sister. Li was shocked by the girl's proposal. The huntress said that the girl's meat was simply divine. The huntress looked at the girl and asked what she thought about this, and also asked to call her sister from now on. Li smiled and said she agreed. The huntress said that meat is a fatty food and asked what about diluting the meal with a glass of suju. The huntress made an order. Li looked at the check and was taken aback, as they had eaten a lot of things, and for a very large amount. The huntress looked at the girl and asked what was wrong with her, and if she thought she would pay the bill. Liz said that she would pay, since the huntress saved her in the dungeon. Wu Ming said that the girl should not even think about it, since she invited her herself, as she wanted to treat her to dinner. The huntress said that after the young lady cooked such delicious meat, she simply had to pay the bill. The huntress said that it looks like the girl cast some kind of magic on the meat. Li smiled but didn't say anything. After a few minutes, Elle said that it was just her new skill. The huntress was shocked by the young lady's skills. She asked if she had skills related to housekeeping. Li thought for a moment and said that she didn't know yet, because until today she had nothing like that. The huntress looked at the young lady and called her name. The huntress said that she would really like to have the skill of frying meat. The huntress looked at the girl and asked if it was possible to give such a skill to her. Li smiled and said that she would start by frying the pork rinds. The huntress asked what the girl wanted to do after her skills awakened. Li said she needed to find a new job because her company went bankrupt. The huntress was surprised that the girl wanted to get a job in an ordinary company. In a world where machines and academies are gaining popularity, turning ordinary people into awakened ones. Wu Ming looked at her and asked what she intended to do since Li had awakened with such a specific class. She didn't understand how a girl could get a simple job. Liz said that although she had awakened, she did not want to be active as a hunter. 10 years ago, she, like many other families, was faced with the fact that her parents died during a monster attack. And from then on, she and her brother lived and relied entirely on each other. Her older brother awakened as a hunter and constantly went to the dungeon, citing the fact that he wanted to provide her with a good life. So he disappeared for several days, or even for several months. When you enter the dungeon, there is no connection, so she could only live in captivity of endless internal excitement. Moreover, upon returning, her older brother always found himself severely traumatized. Li said that she now wants to get a stable and safe job to become a stronghold for her brother, and then he will no longer have to do something so dangerous. Li said, looking at the huntress, that she has strange abilities, and she doesn't see any benefit from the fact that she's good at frying meat. Li said that she might still get a job at a meat restaurant. The huntress smiled and said that everything was not like that at all. She said that the girl thought too narrowly about the activities of the awakened. The huntress said that a hunter is just one of the professions, and 80% of the awakened ones are of the fighting type. So there are indeed many hunters, but the professions are extremely varied. The huntress looked at Elle and invited her to drink the pieces of paper and continue the conversation. Li told the huntress that she has the skill Home Sweet Home. The huntress was shocked and said that this was simply an amazing skill. The huntress was shocked that there was a space that only Elle could summon. Li said the huntress was exaggerating too much since it was just a small studio apartment. She showed her photographs of her house. The huntress was shocked by what she saw. Li said that's why she spent 3 days and 4 nights cleaning the house. The huntress looked and said that this was not the level that was served for cleaning. But after Elle showed photographs of the transformation of her house, the hunter was simply shocked. She screamed in shock that this simply couldn't happen and asked her to admit whether she had bought a new house. Li said it was the same house that she polished to a shine. Li looked at your hands and said that this could not have happened without the help of the deft hands skill. The huntress looked at her and said that her skills work wonders, and she also asked if the girl wanted to become a housekeeper, since after she published the photo, requests would pour in for her. Li said she didn't think she could handle it with her stamina. She said her favorite job was a full-time job covered by 4 major insurance policies. The huntress smiled and said that the girl was really a fan of stability. Li said that safety is better even before crossing the bridge you need to knock on a stone. The huntress said that she could look at how the other one went and go the same way. Lee said that with this personality, she thinks it will be okay to live like an ordinary person, so she diligently sends out her resume to different companies. Wu Ming asked the girl if someone had contacted her. Since she heard that recently, it is so difficult to find a job. Lee said she could still stay afloat, especially now as an employee with 5 years of experience. Unlike newcomers, she is a good candidate. The huntress looked at her and asked if she had any work right now or not. Lee said she doesn't have any work right now. The huntress looked at the girl thoughtfully and said that she had one suggestion. The huntress looked at her and asked if the girl would like to work in their guild. Lee was at a loss. She stood up in shock and asked if what she heard was true. Lee was shocked by such a proposal, since her strength and endurance do not reach her combat skills, and in general, she is not a hunter. Wu Ming looked and did not tell her to calm down. The girl was in shock and did not understand how she could calm down. The huntress said that the name of their guild was quite loud, but in fact it was an ordinary company. She also added that their company had a lot of different departments, and a vacancy had recently opened in the environmental cleanup department, and this could be considered a kind of janitor's job. The huntress said that this was not an easy job, but it paid well. The huntress said that of course we are talking about full employment. The huntress looked at her with a smile and asked what she thought about the proposal. Lee was shocked and said she needed to think about it. After thinking for a moment, she said she agreed. The next day she came for an interview at the company. Lee was a little confused and very worried. She noticed that her new sister's intensity was really impressive. The young lady urgently borrowed an outfit for an interview. She didn't know if he would fit or not. She was met at the entrance by her new sister. She said she came early. The huntress looked at her friend and said that she didn't look like she was suffering from a hangover. Lee smiled and said that, although she did not suffer from a hangover, but the fact that she was going for an interview seemed to her that she had not yet sobered up. The huntress told her sister not to worry, because with such abilities as hers, she would be accepted right away. The huntress looked at her and said that they needed to quickly go inside. She also said that she would accompany Elle to the interview location. A little taken aback, Elle said that she should not be accompanied, because she knew that the huntress was very busy. Wu Ming smiled and said that after all, she recommended her and therefore she should do at least this little. She said that she was originally going to come early and wait for her to leave, but Elle got ahead of her. Lee was very grateful to the girl because thanks to her, she felt a slight surge of strength. She knew she would try her best to cope with the interview. The huntress came closer to Elle and said that she was talking sweetly and just saying hello to her was already an unconditional acceptance of the job. They entered the company, and everyone looked at the huntress and greeted her, smiling. Entering the elevator, they noticed people. They also greeted and smiled. Elle looked at the huntress and understood that a high rank is an indicator of a high position in the company. The huntress looked at the girl and said that she just needed to go through that door. Smiling, the huntress told the girl to call her when she was finished, and also wished her good luck at the interview. Lee smiled and thanked her for taking her through. Lee knew she had to do everything she could to avoid embarrassing her new sister. She knew she needed to relax and act normal. Suddenly, while walking along the corridor, she accidentally fell. She noticed that she had lost her shoe. As she came closer, she noticed that her shoe was stuck to the gum. She was very glad that there was no one in the corridor, but she was puzzled by the fact that the shoe was tightly glued and would not come off. She pulled her shoe and begged her to come unstuck because she couldn't miss the interview. A young man approached her and asked whether her shoe was stuck or not. Lee saw the hunter. She was shocked because she saw him for the second time, and I understood that he was a real handsome man. Lee knew that now was not the time for her to throw away all her thoughts. The young man looked and said that it was slime mucus and therefore difficult to give in. Lee was confused as she had an interview soon. The young man told her to wait a second, and after a moment he pulled her up the shoe along with the concrete. Lee looked at him and thanked him, puzzled. She also said that the mucus seemed very sticky. The young man said if it was hard for her, then he could take the shoe to where she needed it. Suddenly their conversation was interrupted by a man. He asked what was happening in the corridor. They looked at each other, puzzled. The man looked at the hunter and said that the costs of repairs would be deducted from his personal income. Lee noticed that the man was the head of human resources, and he was very angry. Lee looked at the man and said that the hunter was just trying to help her. The man said that he could bet with her that the hunter himself spilled the mucus, which is why he so willingly volunteered to help the girl. But Hunter Can did not want to listen to anything more and quickly left. The man looked at the young lady and said that she needed to go into the office. The man looked at her and said that he would bring the slippers now and asked her to wait a little. Lee was a little puzzled because she had borrowed the shoes from a salon and would now have to reimburse the cost. Lee still decided not to sit idly by and try to peel off her shoes. She hoped that she could still do it. She sat and worked hard on the shoe, and she understood that the young man used the skill, but she also used the skill after she cleaned the shoe with a napkin. The man came to the girl and said that he was a little late because he was looking for a mucus remover, as he thought that it would be uncomfortable for her to walk in slippers. He looked at her and asked how she could clean the mucus with a wet wipe. The girl was scared and asked if she could take wet wipes. The man said that of course it was possible. He was just impressed that she washed off the mucus without a stain remover. He was impressed. He looked at her and asked if he understood correctly that she was an awakened one with abilities related to cleaning. Lee said that more precisely, her abilities are related to owning a household. The man said that even from the point of knowing about their skills, just like the head of the dungeon control department said, she is an outstanding talent. He looked at photographs of her house and said that if he had not heard her explanation, he would have thought they were two different houses. She smiled and said that all these skills, unfortunately, are completely useless in battle. But Lee was also surprised that her new sister was the department head. She thought the department head was Kang. The man said that managers are not appointed because they have a high rank. Although strength, of course, plays an important role when conquering a dungeon, teamwork and the leader's ability to assess the situation are even more important in terms of the head of a department. Wu Ming is a good leader. The man looked at the young girl and asked if she was ready to start work next week. The young lady was surprised that the interview ended so quickly, as 10 minutes had not arrived. The man looked at her and said with a smile that it was possible to make one assessment or another in a short period of time. He looked at the young girl and understood that she had come on the recommendation of the head of the department, who is extremely picky about people, and everything was in order with the documents confirming what was said. The man saw that, moreover, despite the fact that Khan had done bad things, the girl remained calm and even tried to protect him. The man thanked the girl for coming to the interview at the guild. The man said that he was honored to have the opportunity to hire such a talented person like her. The snail looked at his mistress and said that drinking alcohol 2 days in a row was a wrong decision. The young lady looked at him and asked him to show leniency just once. Since such a day there is nothing better than chicken and beer. Lee was very happy, and everything suited her. The only thing that was frustrating was that it was impossible to order home delivery. She wished herself a bon appetit and started eating. She knew that her older brother would be here. They would celebrate her employment together. She said that the 3 weeks that her brother had spoken about had already passed, and she did not understand how long the seizure of the dungeon would continue. Lee looked at the snail and asked if other people could enter her house. She knew that if her brother could not go into the house, then it would be a completely useless house. Snail said family members or visitors are welcome to move into the home. Lee was very happy, because she knew that her brother would be very surprised when he found out that she had acquired a free house. She decided to check before going out what skills she still had in her arsenal. She saw that the skill of dexterous hands had increased because she had been doing nothing but cleaning lately. She saw that her mastery of the pest extermination skill was at a disadvantage. The snail said that she used violence against him, and therefore she had a minus. Lee looked at her friend in shock. She looked at him and asked when she hit him. After thinking for a couple of minutes, she remembered that incident and said that she was very sorry, since she had no idea that the skill would activate automatically. But she still didn't understand why she had a minus. She wondered if it might be because she had hit a snail rather than an insect. Her new friend was shocked and said that he was an unusual snail. He said that he was the manager of the home, that is, in fact, a home fairy, and after the attack on the manager of the home, a fine was imposed on the girl. She looked at her friend and asked for his forgiveness. She said that she had misspoke a little and was wrong, and once again asked the 5-colored girl for forgiveness. 5 Flower said that she had made a huge mistake, and therefore severe punishments were necessary. Lee was shocked. He changed the situation in the house. Lee was shocked and did not understand what this terrible change of styles was. Lee said that she had really wronged him and asked him not to destroy the house anymore. Lee said she thought deeply about her actions and frantically begged for his forgiveness. After some changes in the house, Elle understood that she would have nightmares for a long time. She looked at the wallpaper and asked if it was possible to put it all back again. Five Flowered did not answer her. Lee looked at him and sincerely begged him to fulfill her wish and put the house in order. Five Colored said that this was impossible, and he could not fix this with his abilities. Lee was shocked and did not understand what exactly was impossible. Suddenly, she saw that a hidden quest had opened, namely, a do-it-yourself interior design challenge. She knew that although the quest was a little specific, she had complete freedom of action. Usually there was a huge fine for failing the quest, but in this case it was not like that. But even without some kind of quest, she would not want to live in such an environment. She knew she would start work next Monday, so she has about a week left. She understood that there was more than enough time. Lee knew it was time to use what she received as a reward for leveling up to level 5. Lee thought it would be convenient if she could store regular items in her inventory. She regretted that she could not place only items issued by the system into her inventory. She looked at her friend and said that she was afraid that the solution might harm him. She also thought that it was necessary to wear a mask. She became convinced that the solution was truly poisonous. She decided to quickly apply it and open the door. Lee thought that this was a real chemical biological training. She saw that the weather outside was very strange, but looking around, she saw a fight. Lee quickly decided to close the door. She was in shock and did not understand what had just happened. Lee thought that she was probably imagining all sorts of things because she was tired. Opening the door again, she saw a new landscape. She didn't understand what was going on at all, but after a few minutes she realized that it was a dungeon. She saw that her house was in the middle of a mountain, and various animals were walking in a crowd near it. Lee quickly closed the door. Lee thought she needed to run quickly. Five Colored came closer to the door and said that ventilation was extremely necessary. Lee was puzzled and shouted to the Five Colored man that he should not go outside, since there were monsters there, and in general it was a dungeon. He looked at her and said that this was quite natural. Lee was shocked and didn't understand why this was natural. Pentazvetnik said that the location of the house is in the dungeon. Lee was in shock and did not understand whether her house was actually in the dungeon. Five Flower said that her house is not connected to one dungeon, but it is connected to all of them. Lee asked him if she opened the door, any dungeon would appear before her eyes. He said that she probably understood everything correctly. The young lady shouted that it didn't matter to her whether it was a skill or not, but she could no longer live in such a house. She shouted that she would leave the house immediately. Pentazvetnik said that check-in is free, but check-out is not. Lee said she was deceived by a false offer to buy real estate. Five Color looked at her and said that he was the guarantor of security. They went outside and Elle saw another dungeon. She asked her friend where he was going. He said it was safe here and he would show her it. He approached the border and said that it had a security border. Lee knew she shouldn't let her guard down. She was in shock and did not understand how this even happened. She could not understand the fact that she would see a dungeon from the outside of the house. She looked at her friend and asked what she should do if a hunter suddenly discovered her house. Five Flowered looked at her and said that she would find a house in the dungeon. It's the same as finding a needle in a haystack. She looked at him and said that quite a lot of time had already passed and they needed to return to the house. Pentazvetnik said that the ventilation has already been completed and we can return. Entering the house, Elle was surprised, since the effect of the solution was quite effective and there was no more mold. Lee decided to quickly change the situation. After some shenanigans, she asked her friend if he liked the result. He said he was completely satisfied. She looked at the result and realized that choosing yellow was the right decision after all. Looking back at the door, she saw the forest and realized that, in truth, her favorite color was green. But after some events with this color, she became traumatized, and so she lost her favorite color. She was very nervous because it was her first time painting anything, but painting the walls took less time than she thought, and she also did a great job with the varnishing. She did all the work with the door open, so there was almost no smell. She saw a notification, and there was information that she was being given a reward for leveling up. She hoped that it would be a high reward. Lee is very happy to be rewarded with a washing machine, as she was already worried that she would have to wash things by hand. She also received regular bathroom slippers that never slip. She noticed that these slippers were very cute. I hugged the washing machine. She looked at her friend and said that she was now in seventh heaven. Some time passed and she went to work or was very happy since she was considered a full-time employee of the Blue Dragon. Lee met the huntress. The huntress smiled and asked if the girl had a good weekend. The huntress smiled and said that today there was only Korean food on the menu. The huntress asked Lee to take care of her. Lee smiled and said that she would definitely take care of her, and also said that she still couldn't believe that she was a staff member of the Blue Dragon. The huntress smiled and said that she would soon believe everything that was happening, since their guild and especially the environmental cleanup department had been waiting for a long time. Lee was at a loss. The man looked at Elle and told her to read the employment contract and also sign it. Lee was surprised because there was even a clause about overtime pay. She realized that now she didn't have to worry about her well-being at all. With a trembling hand, she signed the contract. The head of the environmental cleanup department entered their office. Manager Kang looked at the man and told him to meet the new employee, since she was starting to work with him today. Kim Hwan-sun greeted the young lady and said that he was counting on her help. Lee greeted the manager. Chief Kang wished her good work and Elle left. The man had high hopes for the girl. The man provided his assistant with a department uniform. Lee looked and said that it was the same as his. The man said that such a uniform does not restrict movement and the pants are also waterproof. He looked at her and said that she could use one of the lockers and change clothes in peace and later join work. Lee thanked him. Lee looked at her companion and said that she had heard that he had also awakened. He said everything was correct. The man said that among the members of the department, many awakened ones are of his type, but the agility and strength are higher than those of ordinary people. Lee knew that no matter how you look at it, hunters are extremely rude and sloppy. The man said that therefore, in order to restore order, a lot of effort must be made. Lee understood that the work would not be easy, but she was shocked that the company was also paying a premium. She knew that compared to her previous work, this job was simply heaven. The man looked at her and said that she would do it perfectly, since the head of the HR department had praised her very much. Lee was shocked. The man said that he knew that she was able to clean the slime with a wet wipe, and moreover, she stood up for his little brother, so he could not give her anything other than a positive rating. Lee was at a loss because she did not know the executive's younger brother. The man said that he heard that she came to Hunter Kang's defense and asked if that was not true. Lee knew they were brothers. The man said that there is nothing surprising or strange in this, since the brothers behave as if they do not know each other, and they emit a different atmosphere, so that not everyone would be able to notice their similarities. The man said that a certain amount of caution should be observed among hunters, especially with the hunter Khan, since he often spills or breaks something. This person was like the face of their guild, and therefore, in no case could his mistake be pointed out. Lee said she would keep her mouth shut. Lee got to work. She knew that she was earning money and improving her rank, thereby killing 2 birds with 1 stone. At first, Elle was a little scared, but gradually she began to cope completely, since in comparison with her house, such cleaning in the guild was a mere trifle. Entering the room on the 5th floor, she heard an incomprehensible noise. Lee noticed that lately a lot of hunters have been coming to the restroom on the 5th floor. She had previously heard that the hunter's lounge was much larger and more comfortable, but she was wondering why so many hunters ended up in the room on the 5th floor. She looked at the hunters and remembered her brother. She was very interested and worried about him. She wanted to know if he was okay, or it was alarming, because I knew that his next raid had taken too long. An incomprehensible noise tore Elle out of his thoughts. She saw one of the hunters lift up the bed. She didn't understand why he did it. One of the young ladies said that the hunters had been constantly staying on the 5th floor lately, so she thought that something had already happened. Everyone watched as the man carried the bed. A young lady approached the appraiser and asked if he was going to take responsibility for making a mess in the regular employee break room. He looked at her and said that he needed to assess the situation. She said that it was a simple bed, and she also asked what interested him this time. The man said that even though he uses the appraisal skill, the information about the item does not open. The girl said that this was not surprising, since it was a factory product. The man looked at her and said that this was an object. The girl was confused and said that this could not happen since it was the most ordinary bed that is sold in every store. The hunters present said that the recovery buff was most likely activated. Lee was confused and didn't understand what was going on. She heard someone say that the system window usually pops up both the name of the item and its rank, but now there was nothing like that. Lee was perplexed. She thought that this could all be due to the fact that she used the comfortable bed skill, since she used it every time she made the bed. The man was furious and said that there was not a single item that he could not appreciate. He also said that he would have to take the bed to the laboratory in order to figure it out. The girl was shocked and screamed that he shouldn't do that. He said there was nothing wrong with the bed, but he wouldn't give up until he found the cause. Lee realized that she needed to confess everything. She raised her hand and said that she wanted to say something. Lee said the bed was ruined because of her. Everyone was at a loss. Lee said she used the comfy bed skill when hiding the bed. The man was surprised. Lee said she likely needed to get permission. The man looked at her intently, as he was confused. He asked her if she was definitely awakened, since no matter how much he looked at her, she looked like an ordinary person. Lee was confused. Lee said that she was truly awakened. She looked at him and asked how he could call himself an appraiser, but he himself was not able to distinguish an awakened person from an ordinary one. He said that if she is truly an awakened person, then she must prove it. Lee agreed and decided to prove it. He set up a bed for her so she could show off her skills. Lee used her skills to make the bed and told the man to appreciate it. He looked at the bed in disbelief and said that he would look through everything now. He examined the bed, and everyone was watching him closely. The man said that some kind of buff actually popped up. Lee looked at him and said with a smile if he really believed her that she was an awakened one. The man did not have time to answer anything. As he quickly fell asleep, everyone was in shock. Everyone was confused and asked if the recovery skill shouldn't primarily benefit hunters. Other office workers said they also have a hard time due to the constant additional workload. They constantly quarreled because they could not figure out which of them were hunters or ordinary office workers. Lee was shocked by everything that was happening. The heads of the department came to them and asked what was going on. Without ceasing to quarrel, the hunters and ordinary employees bombarded their leaders with questions. Wu Ming looked at her staff and told them not to make any more noise and to immediately go to their assigned rooms. The huntress looked at her subordinates and told them to quickly leave. The huntress reassured Elle and said that she had no bad intentions, but on the contrary, she helped everyone a lot. But the huntress also said that after everyone found out about Lee's skill, they would be asked to use it often. The huntress said that now the commotion will be serious. Lee said that the huntress was completely right. The man looked at his colleague and said that if this happened, then she could take charge of 2 floors, and one of them would be the floor for hunters. The man said that initially each department employee worked on 2 floors, but since she was new, only 1 floor was allocated for her. He looked at her and asked if she was okay with such changes. Lee said that she didn't mind, and they could give her 2 floors. The huntress smiled and said that if someone bothers her, then she just needs to tell her, and she will sort everything out. The manager looked at her and said that then he would assign her another 8th floor. Lee raised her hand because she wanted to ask something. I asked if it was possible to use a scarf and an apron while working. A month later, Elle was greeted like a queen. Everyone tearfully prayed that I was in line so that she would make their bed first. The man interrupted the woman and said that he was dirty with the monster's slime and could not remove the stains with anything. The other woman, in turn, shouted that her desk was a terrible mess and asked if she could help with it. Lee smiled and didn't say that if they pressed her like that, she wouldn't be able to do anything. Lee said that she would first clean the floor and then help everyone in turn. Everyone obediently agreed with her. Looking at all the hunters, she realized that everything was radically different from what she had imagined. She always thought that they were rude and harsh people, but they were still like big children. The huntress came up to her and hugged her, as she was very happy to see her friend. The huntress looked at her friend and said that she really was the spitting image of an idol. Lee looked at her new little sister and said that she would like to know why everyone was looking at her like that. The huntress looked at her and said that she was like a herbivorous rabbit who entered the cave with the tigers. Lee said she was very scared. After her words, the huntress said that in their guild, even the awakened ones did not have people like her, and it was surprising to see someone like her. The huntress said that thanks to such excellent skills, Elle and they had the opportunity to live like humans. The huntress looked at her and asked if she should buy meat for Elle today. Lee was a little surprised and said that she had already bought it yesterday. The huntress said that she could eat the meat she cooked at least 3 times a day. Lee said that while protein is important, it needs to be consumed in a balanced amount. So she asked her new little sister to only eat salad today. The huntress looked at her and said with a smile, "So then they can eat meat tomorrow," and said goodbye to her. The young man approached Elle and asked what about the someone pub that she gave last time. He was wondering if by any chance she was planning to cook something else in the near future. He said that if she needed his fire, she could only tell. Lee was shocked by this. She stood in bewilderment and looked at all the people present, because when she was preparing food for the hunters, she used one of her skills. She divided the prepared food between the 5th and 8th floors, but the hunters ate everything, and in the blink of an eye. They were shocked and at the same time very happy, as they felt that their strength had instantly increased. Moreover, as a sign of gratitude for the delicious food, someone put a magic crystal in her pocket. She knew she couldn't refuse them once. They were so desperate to taste her food. Lee said she would take one day next week to cook them some delicious food. The young man was very happy and told everyone that he had completed his task. He shouted so that they all knew that she agreed thanks to him. The young man was so happy that he did not notice how, because of his joy, a flame rose and the fire alarm began to beep. In the blink of an eye, they were doused with a stream of water. Lee saw Hunter Khan. He was also caught in unexpected rain. Lee was very glad that the cleaning was over and thanked her staff for their help. She knew that thanks to her colleagues, she was able to survive such a fight. Lee instantly remembered the hunter. She wondered if everything was okay with him. Lee thought that she should have at least given him a handkerchief, but unfortunately, he left the room very quickly. Lee realized that she, in general, needed to change clothes and go home, when suddenly she saw strange spots. Following the trail and the stains, she actively washed them. She didn't know if it was because she didn't survive the rag. She saw that a trail of drops led into the office. She looked into the office. She asked if there was anyone in the office. Lee saw Hunter Khan. The young man asked in an angry voice who was behind the door, who was very frightened and taken aback. Entering the office, she apologized for the disturbance and said that there were some dirty drops on the floor, and she followed a trail that ended up in his office. Khan looked at the coffee glass and said that he was just carrying his coffee into the office, and he also said that he was a person who spilled a little from time to time. He looked at her and asked for forgiveness. Khan said that he will clean everything up now. Lee said with a smile that there was no need for that and that was her job. He thanked her. Another hunter came into their office and asked if Khan was going home, since the working day was already over. The hunter said that he was still writing a report. Lee was surprised and didn't understand what kind of reports they were writing. Everyone who returned from the dungeon needed to write a report. It was necessary to record any changes or unusual details in relation to the previously chosen strategy. She understood that the young man was very tired, but still working. She was sure that this was an example to follow. The man looked at her and asked if she had a towel, since Lee said that she had previously used up all the towels due to the flood. She looked at her kerchief and asked if it would be suitable. The young man said yes. Khan began to rub something intently. Lee was confused, did not understand what he was wiping there. While he was wiping the unknown object, he tore the kerchief. Khan was surprised and asked for forgiveness. Lee said everything was fine. Lee saw some strange stone in the young man's hand and asked what kind of stone it was. Khan said that this is an item that he found while clearing the dungeon. He said that since the application and source were unknown, he decided to at least try to remove the rust. Lee looked at the item and asked if she could clean it or if it should not be touched. Khan said that everything was fine and he did not react to the touch. Lee looked and saw that the stone was literally overgrown with rust. She saw a notice where there was information about the stone, but there was not much information since it was very dirty, and therefore it was impossible to detect traces of the past. Lee said the item was covered in a layer of rust that could not be cleaned, making it impossible to detect traces of the past. Khan looked at her and said that she was awakened, but, nevertheless, it would not be easy to cleanse the stone as he had tried many times. Lee said she had already cleared it. Khan was shocked and did not understand how she could do this if he used both force and magic, but there was not even a single scratch on the object. Lee said she just rubbed it. Kang was surprised as the girl was able to clean the item with ease. Lee was confused and said that it really could have been done easily, but she was surprised that he couldn't do it. Suddenly, a few minutes later, they saw a bright light emanating from the stone. They were in shock and did not understand what was happening. Lee was very scared as she unexpectedly fell into the abyss. Lee was in shock and thought that most likely she would die soon. She did not understand what happened and why there was no collision. Moreover, she felt the refreshing aroma of soap. Opening her eyes, she saw that she was lying on top of the young man. Taken aback, she quickly flew away from him and asked for forgiveness. The young man looked at her and asked if she was hurt. Lee said that thanks to him, she was sent away unharmed. He looked at the fragment in her hand and asked her to give it to him, since he thought that everything happened precisely because of him. Lee said that it was really all because of him, since the description of the system had changed, and moreover, he had become a bound item. The young man looked at her and said that no matter what was said, she now became the owner of the item, so it could not be transferred to another person. Lee was shocked, because she knew that the item was obtained from a dungeon and that this was unacceptable. Khan said that there was nothing to be done about it, and he would try to find out what was what. But for now, she needed to keep the item in her inventory. Khan said that now it was necessary to find the gate. Lee looked around and didn't understand where the gate might be. After a thorough search, she saw new notices. She saw that she could activate a new skill. "Where is my home?" Lee was surprised. Kant approached her and asked if she had seen any new notification. Lee said such information should not be disclosed carelessly. Lee said that she suddenly received a notification about a new skill, so she thought it might be useful when using the dungeon. She also asked for forgiveness for her tactlessness. The young man said that if it helps, then she can use it. Lee looked at him and asked if he should keep this a secret. He said that of course he would, and could even swear on a magic crystal. Lee saw a map of the dungeon and the location of their location, as well as the houses and where the gates were located. Kan looked at everything and said that this was just an amazing skill, and even more. He said that with her skill, you can clear the dungeon twice as fast and even in the blink of an eye. Lee froze in place. The young man looked at her and said that he really wanted to recruit her into the strategic planning department. Lee said there was no way she would sign up for this. Lee said that she does not have any fighting skills, and her strength is just the same as that of an ordinary person, and, in fact, she is an ordinary person. He looked at her and said that they would return to this conversation later, but first he needed her to show the location of the gate using her skill. The young man also asked her what about the boss. Lee said there was no mark. Khan said that the skill cannot make a mistake, and most likely U Dungeon has already been destroyed by the boss. Lee said that was good news. Khan said that the path to the gate was not close, so he suggested that we rest a little and hit the road tomorrow morning. They lit a fire and sat by the fire. Khan offered to have a snack. Lee thanked him. Lee was surprised because she saw that he gave her beef jerky. The young man said that this is a special subject that is allocated only to a member of the strategic planning department. Lee saw that Khan was throwing something. She was at a loss. Khan said that this is a powder made from magic crystals, and thanks to it, the monsters will not be able to recognize their habitat. He looked at her and said that clearing dungeons was not as dangerous as she thought. Lee realized that the young man was much more persistent than it seemed at first glance. She said she refuses. The young man looked at her and asked her to think carefully about what he said earlier. He looked at her and said that if she experienced dangers on her way, then he would provide her with complete protection from his side. After his words, Elle almost agreed. She looked away and said that it was time to go to bed. Lee walked away from him. He was perplexed and asked what she was doing. Lee said she was just going to make a sleeper. He said she could use a sleeping bag. He looked at her and asked how shameless a person he looked in her eyes. The young man said that he would stand and watch, so that she needed to go to bed. Lee said he should also go to sleep for a while. The young man said that he was completely fine and, in general, initially did not sleep well outside the house. Lee looked at him and said that he had been in the dungeon for a month after all and must be very tired. Looking at Elle's sleeping bag, she saw that it was very expensive and realized that if she broke it, her bank balance would be 0. Lee looked at the young man and said that if he starts to feel sleepy, he must definitely wake her up. The young man said that he would definitely wake him up. Lee slowly fell asleep. Kan looked at the young lady. He looked at her and realized that a lot of time had passed since someone cared about him. Kan sat quietly and guarded his companion. Before Lee could open her eyes, she saw the young man. He was looking at her and asked if she had woken up yet. Lee was in shock and didn't understand why he was so close. She didn't understand why the visibility was like lights somewhere high. Looking around a little, she was in shock and did not understand what was happening. She asked him to put her on the ground. He said it was very dangerous and she might get hurt. Lee started to get nervous and said that she would go herself. He looked at her and said that he understood her and asked her to calm down. Kang looked at her and said that she seemed a little seasick, and he also hoped that she would feel much better. Lee said she felt more or less better. Khan said that he tried his best to wake her up, but he couldn't, and so he was left with no choice but to pick her up and carry her, either in shock and asking for forgiveness. She didn't understand how he even thought of running away with her in his arms. She also blamed herself for sleeping so soundly. He looked at her and said that if she had slept a little longer, he would have already reached the gate. Khan said that he was even a little sorry. Lee said that although the speed was fast, she was a little seasick and could not stand it for a second. Khan told her to stop because he saw that there were people nearby. Lee began to look closely at the area. He said they were far away and she wouldn't be able to see them. Lee looked at the direction that Kok was pointing and said that most likely they should ask them for help. Khan said that this should not be done. He said that it's not often you see people in dungeons where the boss has been defeated. He knew there was something fishy about it. He said that soon she would have only slaves working here. The young man said that they should watch them first. Lee was sure it was very dangerous. Khan said that by coincidence the people were moving in the same direction as them. Lee was shocked and asked what awaits them this time. Khan said it likely looks like human trafficking. Lee was in shock and did not understand who was buying people into the dungeon and why. Kang said that the dungeons contain various resources, magic items, crystals, elixirs, and their value is very high, and all dungeons are owned by the government or government-approved guilds. But sometimes illegal resource extraction occurs in the dungeons, which is not reported to anyone. Lee was shocked, as she was very happy that there was no boss in the dungeon, but it turned out that they ended up in a den of criminals. Khan looked at her and told her not to worry since he is not going to fight while she is with him. He told her that they would just quietly pass by and he would report everything to management. Lee breathed a sigh of relief. He said that before they go, he will give her something. He looked at her and put on his robe. Lee was at a loss. She saw that it was a cloak of concealment, and as long as she didn't make a big fuss, it would keep her out enemies' field of view. And this also applied not only to monsters, but also to people and animals. Lee thanked him and said that it was a very valuable item. He looked at her and said that the robe was too long and it would be very difficult for her to move. Lee thanked him for his concern. He quickly tore off a long piece and asked her to try on the robe. Khan said he now thinks the length will be just right for her. Lee was in shock and did not understand how he was able to tear his object. Lee said that if the robe was made from dungeon byproducts, it must have cost hundreds of millions. He looked at her and said that it was probably true. Lee didn't understand how he could take it and tear it apart so easily. Khan looked at it and said that it was an item that would wear out after a few uses anyway. He looked at her and said with all warmth that what was more important now was that this item would be useful to her. Lee looked at him with big, beautiful eyes. As the young man left, he told her to slowly follow him. Lee asked him to wait. Because I wanted to quickly collect pieces of fabric, because I knew that they were very valuable. As they got closer, they saw a mine of deposits. They began to slowly go down and saw that people were working there. Lee understood that they had now entered the territory of their own enemy. It seemed to her that her heart was beating twice as fast. Khan saw that the gate was open, but the security at the gate had been strengthened. Lee didn't understand how to be like that then. Khan told her not to worry because he would simply grab her in his arms and rush past the guards like a bullet. Khan looked at her and said that they needed to be extremely careful. Lee heard a familiar voice. She heard the young man shouting that the man had fallen down exhausted. He also shouted that he would work for 2 people and therefore asked the soldiers to provide medical assistance to the man. Seeing who was screaming, Elle was shocked as it turned out to be her brother. She was completely confused since she had not seen him all the time and realized that he had been kept here all the time. Khan came closer to her and asked what happened to her. Lee said that the man was her older brother. While he was arguing furiously with the guard, he hit him. Lee saw that her brother had fallen to the ground and decided to punish his offender. He said it could be dangerous and stopped her. Khan looked at her and said that he would deal with this problem himself. He also handed her a dagger and asked her to take it. He looked at the movement below and told Elle to keep the dagger with her for self-defense. In the blink of an eye, he jumped off the mountain. Lee was shocked by his abilities. In a second, he scattered all the enemies. Khan easily dealt with his enemies. The girl was surprised by what she saw, since the young man managed to turn everything into ashes in an instant. She had the feeling that the one with whom she was communicating had previously been a different person. Suddenly she saw a man with a rifle. She saw that he was aiming straight at her brother. Lee could not allow this to happen, and with all her strength she threw a dagger at him. She was glad that she was able to neutralize the man. But suddenly soldiers approached her in order to quickly deal with her. She stepped back, but in the blink of an eye, Khan dealt with the enemies. He came closer to her and asked if she was okay. He was surprised that she accepted his hand, as he looked more like a monster than a man after the battle. Khan said that all the kidnappers had been defeated and suggested that she quickly leave this place. Lee thanked him for saving her. She said with a smile that thanks to him she remained alive. The young lady asked the young man for forgiveness for throwing a dagger at a man. After all, the dagger was very valuable. She said that if there were scratches on the dagger, he should deduct compensation from her salary. He was very surprised and smiled back at her. He said that he was very glad that the dagger was also useful to her. Khan said that the dagger is durable and nothing will happen to it. All the people were very grateful that the hunters came to their rescue. They happily thanked them. The young man saw his sister and was very surprised, and he was also very happy. She ran up to him and started beating him. She asked with tears in her eyes why he was in such a place. He hugged her tightly and asked for forgiveness for making her worry. Also, with a smile on his face, he said that he had already returned to her. Lee called her department head and apologized for having to be away from work and for not notifying her boss. The boss said that there were no problems and was glad that she was safe and sound. He also said that the hunter explained everything so that she didn't need to worry about anything. After the incident, Hunter Kong gave a press conference and talked about how they discovered the illegal dungeon and arrested everyone involved. The boss told the girl to rest and start work on Monday. Lee was surprised and asked if this was normal. The boss said that if she really wanted to, she could go to work from tomorrow. Lee thanked her boss and said that she would rest for a while. Lee recalled a crazy day, as it began with an arrest, then the criminal was handed over to the police, and then there was a retelling of all the events. But nevertheless, the girl was very glad that she was able to return home safely. The young man was surprised that his sister was still waiting for him. He said that she must have been very tired and returned home first. Lee looked at him and said that she had decided to return with him. He said that although he had been absent for several days, he still clearly remembered their address. Lee looked at him and said that their house disappeared because it was sucked in during the dungeon. He was shocked and asked if she had received compensation for the deposit, but more importantly, he was interested in the question of where she lives now. Lee said she lives in a new house. The young man was at a loss, because he knew that they had not yet been able to fully repay the loan, and he did not understand how she managed to find new housing so quickly. Lee took his hand and led him along. She said he needed to follow her. He was at a loss and did not understand where she was leading him. He looked at her and asked why she brought him to a deserted alley. Lee said that she would explain everything to him later and also asked him to fill out only one thing. The young man was at a loss. She said that when they entered the house, there would be a snail. Lee asked him not to call him an insect or any other rude word under any circumstances. This was very important to her, and she asked her brother to remember her. The young man was perplexed and did not understand at all what his sister was talking about. She said that she had already woken up. The young man carefully examined his sister's new house. 5 flowers came closer to her and said that he condemned her for spending the night outside the house without permission. Lee looked at him and asked for forgiveness, as she said that there was an accident and she fell into the dungeon, but she said that she was safe and sound. She also thanked her friend for his concern. Lee gave the young man a 5-color mark and said that it was her brother, the young man who greeted his new friend. The young man looked at his sister and said that after they introduced themselves to each other, she could finally explain everything. Lee said it's a very long story. She said that her skill was a new home, and moreover, she got a job with All the Dragon where he was amazed and said that she was the best. The young man told the girl not to get close to the guild hunters as it is very dangerous. Lee was shocked and said that he also became close to the hunters. The young man told her not to forget that he was deceived since he went to the dungeon as a garbage collector, but he had no idea that he had run into human traffickers. He apologized to her, and he said that although he knew that she was very worried about him, he still worried about her no less. He looked at her and said that he would come under no circumstances and would not leave her alone. Lee said that she now earns more than before, so he can take some time to rest and think about what he should do next. The young man looked at her and asked what class she belonged to. Lee looked at him and asked if he wasn't a hunter. He looked at her and told her not to laugh when he said. She smiled and said she wouldn't laugh at him. The young man said that his hidden class is farmer. The brother said that was why he was not very surprised when she said that she was the housekeeper. He said that it looks like brother and sister are like birds of a feather. Lee was furious and asked him what was funny about this. She was furious since he was a farmer and was only supposed to do farming and not go to the dungeon. The young man said that this was the best choice. The young man said that his skills were useless in the world because they were applied only to the earth. And in an ordinary company, the salary is tiny, and to earn money at his age, there is nothing better than the work of a hunter. Lee was furious at his words. She couldn't understand how he even thought of going and becoming a hunter. She accidentally started the skill and overdid it. When she saw her brother lying on the floor in tears, she asked for forgiveness, since she did not know that the action had been launched. He looked at her and said that she was only treating him like a pest because she was angry. He noticed that it was too much on her part. After that, she yelled at him again and said calmly that they needed to eat first, then wash, and then talk normally. While leaving the bathroom, the young man heard a noise and a pleasant smell. Lee said she went to the store and bought a lot of meat, so that he can eat as much as his heart desires. He was shocked and did not understand how she could manage to buy everything in a short time. Lee said she could go anywhere. The young man was amazed and said that her skill was truly amazing. He was very glad that after some time he was able to eat home-cooked food. Lee said that when he was around, she finally felt like she was home. He ate the food that she prepared and was shocked because it was very tasty, and literally in his mind it was God level. The young man looked at her and asked what happened while he was away. Lee said it was all because of her new skills. A moment later, he asked her to fry more, either in shock since he quickly managed to eat everything. He looked at her and asked how she got to the top dungeon since he was very scared for her. Lee said that because of the object that discovered the hunter, she was able to fall there. The young man looked at the stone and asked what its nature was. Lee said that she didn't know and the hunter himself didn't know either. Like a friend, unexpectedly for them, the 5-flowered tree lit up and illuminated them with a bright light. He looked at them and said the assessment was complete. They looked at him in bewilderment. Lee took the stone from the 5-flowered tree and said that it should not be touched. She was shocked when she saw the stone. Because it was polished to a shine, 5-flower said that this was his ability. Lee looked at him and said that it said that the payment would be like in a game. She looked at the stone and asked if she could use it. 5-flowered again took the stone from her. They were at a loss and did not understand what was happening. Unexpectedly, the rank of the house increased for them. The young people saw that their home had really expanded. Lee was shocked as they now had a dining table and another room. The young man was very glad that he had his own room. The restriction has been lifted. And after that, the young man could live in the house. Lee asked her friend if her brother would be able to enter the house safely or if he needed to be close to her. Pietzitvetnik said that there was a spare key and asked the young man to give his hand. In an instant, the house key was imprinted on his hand. The young lady was shocked because it was her first time seeing this, and it was an amazing sight. 5-color said that entry is possible at any time. However, only in specially designated places. Pentasvetnik said that it is required to establish the location of the front door. Installation of the first door is free. All subsequent ones are paid. They were very happy and started a new meal. The young man thanked his sister and said that he had eaten very well. Lee said that if he went to bed immediately after eating, he would become fat. The young man said that about the dirty dishes. He would put everything away and wash it later, so she didn't have to touch anything. Lee told him to get up because he needed to wash the dishes and do the cleaning. The young man was surprised because he did not understand why he should suddenly do the cleaning. Lee was furious and said that she needed to clean up first and then sleep. She looked at him and said that if he came to her house, then he followed her laws. He looked at her and told her to give him exactly 15 minutes, and then he would start cleaning. She approached him and told him to get up quickly. The brother asked to wait a little longer. She angrily swung the tray at him and told him that if he didn't get up, he would become a threat to his home. He looked at her and said that it was all because of skill. Lee was surprised. Lee said she needs to provide proper training regarding his behavior. The brother looked at her and said that if he lies down for more than 15 minutes, he will receive a buff. Lee was surprised and said that he had a very strange skill. She sighed and said that he had exactly 15 minutes. He was glad because the buff worked and the young man began cleaning. He wanted to open the window first. The young lady was taken aback because she forgot to tell him that there was a dungeon outside. Opening the window, he saw an interesting and terrible sight. The young man quickly closed the window. He said in a trembling voice that he was probably too tired and was imagining things. Lee went to the window to open it. The young man told her not to do this. Lee said it was not a hallucination at all. She said that their house was underground. The young man said that he was collecting his words that she had a cool skill, since he thought that it was very creepy. Lee said he just needed to get used to it. Lee said there is a safe zone boundary, so it's not dangerous. Lee looked at him and said that the five-colored man told her that the young man would open and close the door to the dungeon at will, and if he opened the door to the dungeon, remember the dungeon he had been to, he would be able to get there again. The young man said in a friendly voice that there was no dungeon that he wanted to get into again. The young man jumped to his feet. Lee looked at him and asked if she scared him. He was puzzled because he could use dungeon and his skills. The young man said that he could engage in farming here. Lee remembered that he told her that his skills only worked in the dungeon. He was very happy, as he would be able to become a farmer in the dungeon in the future. After some time, Elle came to the Hunter Khan. The huntress looked at her and asked if she was afraid of being fired because of a thing called a space shard. Lee was puzzled because she didn't know what to do if she was asked to return it. She said that she could not tell the truth that the stone turned into a black seed. After all, in this case, she will have to tell about her skill too. The huntress looked at her friend and asked what she was worried about, because she could just lie that it suddenly disappeared from inventory. Lee was perplexed and asked if it was possible to lie to the head of the department. The huntress said that it was all Khan's fault, so she doesn't have to worry. Lee remembered her brother saying the same thing. The huntress said that the young man would not make a mountain out of a mountain, so she has nothing to worry about. The huntress smiled and said that since they visited the dungeon together, their relationship became closer. Lee was surprised. The huntress said that no matter what Elle would worry about, she tried to bribe him. Lee said that it would be impossible to bribe him since he already has absolutely everything. The huntress said that hunters have pronounced all 5 senses, so they cannot sleep normally, and some of the dishes seem tasteless. And the Hunter Khan has a particularly keen sense of taste, and therefore he stuffed himself with food so as not to die of hunger. Lee was surprised. The huntress said that Elle and said that her hands were from God and therefore she would be able to cook something tasty. The young lady looked at her friend and smiled at her and said that she could do it and she should try at least once. Lee looked at her friend and asked if she had been nice to her all this time because of the meat. The girl laughed and said that was all because she was very nice. Lee came to the Hunter Khan. He said he was very glad to see her. Lee was very surprised because he remembered her name. Lee thanked him for meeting him. They greeted each other awkwardly for a long time. Khan said that it was time to end the greeting and invited her to go inside. Entering Elle's office, she asked for forgiveness for disturbing me. The young man looked at her and asked what brought her here. Lee said she prepared a lunchbox for him. He was surprised. Lee said she just did what she had to do. She looked at him and said that he must definitely have lunch and asked him to try and eat at least a piece. It was the favorite food of the hunters of the guild. Lee said she didn't bother too much. The young man was puzzled, but after looking at it, he agreed. She looked with her big, beautiful eyes. He said that he would definitely try her food. He knew that all the food that came into his mouth would be as bland as hay. Khan understood that it was a waste of time and effort. When he tried the first bite, he was shocked. Lee looked at him and asked if he was okay since the amount of food was large and he ate it all in one sitting. She looked at him and asked if his stomach hurt. He was shocked because he didn't understand how he could eat everything himself. He looked at her and asked what she fed him.